Hey, how are we doing, everybody, and welcome into the final of our 3 Monday morning episodes here for Week 13 fantasy football action. In this particular episode, I'll be talking 5 running backs I'm looking to go buy after those Week 12 games on Sunday afternoon. Now, of course, we do still have Monday Night Football here for Week 12 action between the Seattle Seahawks and the Washington football team. You can go check out my prop bet on Thrive Fantasy in my top 5 wide receivers to buy for this week's episode. That's also out today as well. But full disclaimer, full disclosure here, I'm going to be completely honest. Now, I hope you guys will keep watching today's episode and tune in to figure out what I've got to say about these players and to go out and make these offers for these players that are obviously advantageous to your lineups down the stretch of this season. But you're probably going to have to absolutely drag these players off of opposing fantasy rosters for the simple fact that we lost a lot of running backs, a lot of very important upper echelon running backs in the fantasy football world. Dalvin Cook dislocated his shoulder. He's potentially out. We don't really know what the timetable is today. So later on this morning, he's going to have an MRI to figure out the damage caused by that issue. And then CMC heading into a bye is also in a walking boot. So we'll figure out more about his injury later on today, probably as well, from either Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter. So keep your ears low to the ground. But again, it's probably going to cost you more than you'd like to go out and acquire these names. However, in the event that you are able to go trade for them, we've got 5 running backs to go talk about for today's episode. Before I get too deep into today's episode, though, I want to give a huge thanks to Manscaped for going ahead and sponsoring today's episode. And much like the running backs in the fantasy trade market right now, you're going to have to be prying your Manscaped products away from friends and family members this holiday season at your family Christmas get-togethers, because just how awesome these products are and how useful they are for us men out there, or potentially the ladies watching today's episode. You can use Manscaped's products as well. The Lawnmower 4.0 is by far my favorite product that they have for me to use and that they've hooked me up with here in the last month or so. The anti-nick technology is fantastic. The light that is on the blade, I don't actually have my Lawnmower 4.0 with me right now. It's back at home in Madison, but I came home for the Thanksgiving holiday. It's my last day here in the replacement studio on the road here. So we'll have the Lawnmower 4.0 back for next week's ad. However, we're a huge fan of it. We love Manscaped's products. Their boxers are awesome as well, super comfortable. But go check out manscaped.com. They've still got their Black Friday deal going on, 25% off site-wide, in addition to some other deals they've got going on the site. Or you can use promo code SIZZLE. You see it at the top of the screen. That'll get you guys set up with 20% off and free shipping. You can go ahead and get yourself hooked up with some love for Manscaped this year, or you can give it as the perfect gift for those in your family this holiday season. Alrighty, one more time, that's manscaped.com and promo code SIZZLE for 20% off and free shipping of all products on their site. It's my favorite thing to give to the members of my family this holiday season. And for myself personally, I love the utility that their products have for me. But getting into the episode now, thank you again to Manscaped for sponsoring today's episode. We touched on this in the intro. None of these are going to be easy to pry away from opposing fantasy managers, and I was very hesitant to title today's episode Buy Low Running Backs, and that's why we went with the must-buy tag for today's episode, because, again, I don't really think there's such a thing as a buy low running back right now. The market is so desperate. If you think about, fantasy football running backs like trading stocks, the market is desperate for some more running backs to be introduced to the market here that have workhorse running back potential and usages in their offenses. And with the injuries, again, that are piling up, the situations are still there, but the talent might not be there and able to capitalize on those situations. So DeAndre Swift, who exited early in the first quarter of the Thanksgiving Day contest between the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions, is my first must-buy for this week. Again, we've been talking DeAndre Swift a few weeks now. I apologize for those of you that have been watching this episode the past couple of weeks now, as we do have 2 names that are just recurring opportunities where I feel that the presence of that opportunity is just constant week after week to go out and buy for them. So we're keeping them on the list, and I don't want to toss another name in there that I don't necessarily like as much just to put them in there for the sake of changing things up. So we do have 3 relatively new names today, but 2 of these will be repeats from last week's episode. DeAndre Swift, though, he's super dynamic, and when he's healthy, Dan Campbell absolutely feeds him the football in both the rushing and receiving game. With Jared Goff being banged up and not 100% healthy and playing as poorly as he is, Campbell's keeping the ball out of his hands and making sure that DeAndre Swift is the primary playmaker in this offense. So I love the closing schedule. Again, I love the talent. This offensive line is a little bit banged up right now, but they are overall a very good five-man group. Arizona, Atlanta, and Seattle is the closing schedule during the fantasy football playoffs. And in championship week 17, he has the Seattle Seahawks, which is arguably my favorite opposing matchup for a fantasy running back right now, with how much effectiveness, success, efficiency we're seeing opposing running backs have against that unit, whether it's yards after contact, amount of tackles broken, getting completely gashed in the run game. Seattle has really struggled, and DeAndre Swift could be a championship week winner with the performance he has in that game if he's healthy and ready to go. So you've got a longer week here recovering from that shoulder issue. His availability for week 13 is a little bit in question right now, but for a top 12 running back to be able to go out and buy him at a discount because of some potential injury risk, that's a situation that if you can afford to take the gamble on, I would certainly entertain. Alvin Kamara, certainly not a buy low option. However, his stock is probably as low as it's going to get for this season due to the fact that he missed his third straight game this past week, another Thanksgiving Day non-performer rather. He was supposed to take on the Buffalo Bills, who were at the time the number one ranked unit against fantasy running backs going into that matchup, or rather they were the week prior before they played Jonathan Taylor and the Colts. However, the Saints got steamrolled without Alvin Kamara, and missing that third straight game was awfully costly for fantasy lineups out there. However, I do love the opportunity for when he comes back. This is like a DeAndre Swift is a top 12 weekly producer. He's got a long week to recover and repair that MCL sprain. Well, you're not technically rebuilding that MCL sprain or repairing that, but recover rather, and get yourself back to full health. Aaron Jones for the Green Bay Packers suffered a similar injury, but to a lesser extent. He only missed one game for that matter. Alvin Kamara's knee issue has been a little bit more extensive here. But what I like is coming back. The Saints have him with Dallas this week on week 13. Josh Jacobs just had a big day against them. Again, another Thanksgiving Day game. It's weird to see that we had 3 Thursday afternoon games last week. But I overall like the situation here. Alvin Kamara is just an easier buy right now than he normally would be, again, because of the presence of this injury. Not saying his trade stock's going to take a hit in all leagues out there. And again, we do acknowledge that trading for running backs is going to be a pressing matter and definitely nothing easy to get your hands on. So if you can find a way to acquire Alvin Kamara at a discounted price, all the better. If not, we totally get it. That's fine. David Montgomery, here's the other reoccurring name on the list for today's episode. Plain and simple, the production just wasn't there against the Lions. He did have 20 total touches and 74 yards from scrimmage. He was a healthy level receiver in that football game, 28 yards receiving, only 46 yards rushing though. At the end of the day, I just expect more for David Montgomery. I think that when you're seeing a guy get 20 touches in his offense, you're expecting a higher level of output. And for Montgomery, this was one of his better games earlier on in the season when he actually got injured later on in that contest. So down the stretch of the year, I love Montgomery's matchup. He's got Arizona, Green Bay, Minnesota twice, Seattle, and the Giants. I think every single one of those matchups has top 12 potential for Montgomery in those individually framed weeks. I think he's a high-end RB2 for the rest of the season, even if he has a couple more down games here and there between now and the rest of the season. So Montgomery, a running back I'm feeling super confident in. I love, again, he's a super underrated fantasy running back workhorse who gets a lot more volume than he's given credit for, and I think that slips under the radar a lot of times because he plays for the Bears, and overall offensively, they don't have a super high production output. So Montgomery, though, again, a player I'm confident in. We've said this going back to maybe even a week prior to his return against Pittsburgh. He's been a buy low option for us, a fantasy trade target for us because we like the situation, we love the schedule, we love the volume. Everything on paper has the makings to be a top 15 running back rest of season at bare minimum. He's just got to capitalize on the volume, the workload, the opportunity, and give us those numbers at the end of the day. Najee Harris, we talked about him within the last 2 weeks or so, but coming off his worst outing of the season, there's the potential here again for some panic to a rise in the fantasy community in the trade market. I've personally been checking in on Najee Harris's trade stock every week for like the past 3 weeks. I haven't gotten anywhere. Now that tells you an intelligent fantasy manager is not going to move Najee Harris for anything less than a haul, and they're not going to give him up easily. And again, that goes right back to the start of today's episode. But with him having the equivalent to his lowest production output of the season, he's got 2 4.5-point games this year. That mainly was a result of game script, though, this week. 41-10 was a 31-point margin of defeat for Pittsburgh against Cincinnati in Week 12, and that ultimately led to one of Najee Harris's lowest level of volume, only 11 touches in that game. That, again, is his lowest marker of the season. So I fully anticipate Najee's volume to skyrocket back up to the normal level of production for him on a week-to-week basis after this game. Pittsburgh, in my opinion, is not an elite NFL team. However, they should stay in games a lot more effectively down the stretch of this season. Division opponents like Cincinnati sniff out the BS with teams. They figure out all of the savvy ins and outs that they use, and they've got a lot of tape on these teams. So I'm not surprised. You typically see a lot of upsets, a lot of closely contested games between teams on paper that shouldn't be very competitive with one another simply because they are division rivals, and that almost adds another level of football dynamics to the situation. So Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, it's been a rivalry here for, they are in the same division after all, the AFC North, and this has been a decent rivalry dating back the last, 5, 6, 7 years, probably longer than that for what all I know here. But Najee Harris, simply a top 5 running back the rest of the season. If you can buy him at a discount right now, certainly something that I'm looking to do. Again, it's probably going to cost you a fortune. And then Saquon Barkley here. Look, plain and simple, Saquon Barkley has not lived up to expectations this season, and he certainly does not look like what was once a first-round pick for a lot of leagues or an early second-round pick for some smaller team leagues out there. But there is the potential here, and on paper, the next 3 games look like advantageous opportunities for Barkley to get back to being himself, whatever that looks like at this point in time, because to be quite honest, we haven't seen Saquon Barkley be himself or whatever that expectation of Saquon Barkley has been for us the last 48 months or however long it's been. Saquon has had injury-riddled seasons. He's had a terrible situation in New York. And at the end of the day, he just, again, has not delivered that RB1 hype that I think a lot of us have hoped he would be able to attain when he came into the league. But again, on paper, the next 3 matchups look pretty nice for Saquon, starting out with the stretch here against the Dolphins in Week 13. I'm hoping Saquon can turn it around. We've got him on the episode today because for a player of Saquon's talent, this is really where the argument is, the foundation of our argument essentially here for why you should at least test the waters for a Saquon Barkley is his struggles have been ongoing throughout the season. But we know Saquon's talent is there. We know the upside and potential is there. He simply needs to capitalize on it. Now, we're going to tell you right now, this is a risk. If you're going to go out and trade for Saquon Barkley, there is a significant level of risk involved with that because there's a fair shot that he might not actually become a top 12 level producer on a week-to-week basis. And frankly, he's probably not going to be a top 12 producer every week the rest of the way this season. However, he does have that potential because of how explosive he is. We saw Jason Garrett the first game without him this week against Philadelphia. Saquon was able to get out in space and make one run that looked like a signature Saquon Barkley run. But outside of that, he was held very, very quiet. It was not an overly productive game, only 7 points in half PPR. I think this is one where if you have a roster that is deep enough to make a move where you could acquire Barkley as your RB2, maybe even your RB3, now that's a luxury a lot of teams do not possess, but if you have the opportunity, it's at least worth exploring. Again, though, I will acknowledge the risk here, the non-presence of a elite week-to-week floor. The Giants situation in its own right is a very risky business to get yourself involved with. However, the intrigue of that upside, the intrigue of that ceiling makes him a more valuable asset than some of our other lower-end RB2 names who give us steady floors but don't really have much ceiling or much upside for us to consider weekly when we're setting our lineup. So if you can use for example, I'll say Josh Jacobs is someone who I would maybe be willing to flip for a Saquon Barkley on the hope that maybe Barkley can deliver some higher level ceiling performances than a Jacobs could down the stretch. Another example would be a Damian Harris, who we're seeing Ramondre Stevenson start to infringe more and more upon his touch count. I would maybe sell a safer floor option like a Harris for a Saquon Barkley. Now, again, Saquon's got name value in fantasy. Saquon does have that upside. Fantasy managers might be hung up on the fact that they drafted him with a first or second round pick and not be willing to move him for a cheaper price. That could impact your availability, or your ability to get Saquon onto your fantasy rosters. But again, it's always worth figuring out what's out there and assessing those situations for your team. Alrighty, those were our 5 running backs we're looking to buy this week. Again, I've said it a million times in today's episode, but I want to make it abundantly clear. These are not supposed to be buy low candidates, because with the running back situation and how that market is playing out right now, these are going to be anything but cheap buys, and I think this is going to be the most difficult position now more than ever to trade for this week. So be careful, be cautious. If you've got questions for me down in the comment section below, please ask them. I'm happy to help you guys figure out if the trades you're attempting to make or have been offered are worth following through with here. So again, drop those down in the comment section below, and I'll get back to as many of you guys as I can as quickly as possible. It might take me a day or so to start getting back to those comments, but I will eventually start to filter through a large majority of those questions and those comments down there in the comment section. So thank you guys so much for watching. Again, be careful. Do not oversell yourself, or do not be too aggressive with how you're trading late in the season here, because while we are late, this week was a great example of how depth matters, and having handcuff options, for even just your team's #1 fantasy back can be such a valuable asset and resource because of how these guys are starting to drop down now. And with the extended week of the season, I'm interested to see how that wear and tear will especially impact the running back position, which we're already seeing start to be hobbled right now in just week 12. So thank you guys so much for watching. Go check out some of our other videos today. We've got 2 more episodes in addition to this one, and I'll see you guys there. Peace out.